This is the Selectmen's meeting, Town of Gulfstown, 24 September. Our first item is our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board convened at 5:40 this evening, and 1 minute later went into non-public to discuss a compensation issue and hiring issue. And then just prior to 6 o'clock came out of non-public. We're at now. Let's have the motions that we addressed in non-public.
The first motion will be to approve the new hire request for a part-time per diem EMS presented by the fire chief. As presented, he had a nominee.
Thank you. There's been a motion.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of this motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
4-0. Selectman Devanza is not here. We expect him in maybe 10 minutes. There was a second motion now.
Yeah, the second motion was, you did that? I'm sorry.
You're right.
Go ahead.
It doesn't matter. Second motion, presented by the town administrator, Sue DeRusso. Uniform pay scale, pay rate for the note takers. We discussed that, and the motion was made.
Yep, that's your motion. Thank you. And a second?
I'll second it.
Those in favor of the motion concerning the note takers' compensation indicate say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, since it was discussed in non-public, just for transparency's sake, we did have two separate pay structures based upon experience level for those who take minutes. And what we are now going to is a more of like a fee schedule type arrangement where the note takers will be paid a set amount for each hour they are in attendance at a meeting, recognizing that that also requires back-end transcription. So there will no longer be two rates. There will be one single rate, and it will be easier to administer because it will be based upon the length of a meeting, which also takes into consideration the fact that there's back-end transcription.
And the lengths of meetings are documented, so it's the transparency of the length of the meeting and compared to the rate being paid is
right. And the other thing that we should
easy to
notice
figure.
is that the town administrator did a cost analysis on both methods, and it was negligible. And this is just an easier way for workers' compensation. Right? It's workers' comp, Derek, that triggered this.
That's one of the reasons that was triggered for the change in the form to designate them as independent contractors rather than town employees.
Okay.
We will delay discussing minutes until Selectman Devanza is here, so we'll move right into the announcements. And I have one that concerns the, it's called the National Take Back. I have that right? Yep. National Take Back Day. This is for prescription drugs that we've all accumulated in our medicine cabinets, kitchen counters, and wherever else in our house. An effort to properly dispose of prescription drugs. And to that effect, the Gulfstown Police Department announces a one-day collaborative effort with federal, state, and local county law enforcement agencies to potentially remove dangerous substances from our household. The National Take Back Initiative will provide unified opportunity for the public to surrender pharmaceutical substances and other medications to law enforcement officers for destruction. Any unused prescription medication will be accepted. No needles or liquids can be accepted. The event is this coming Saturday from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, Gulfstown Police Department, which is located at 326 Mass Road. The police department then turns over the prescription drugs to the Department of DEA for destruction. And if you wish more information on this initiative, you can call one of the police officers, Thomas Hammond, and he's at 497-4858. That's Officer Hammond. Do we have any other announcements? Board members?
Nope.
No.
Good.
I'd like to address the item 5 on our agenda, acceptance of donations. Do you have the background on that, Derek?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The town has received a donation, actually 2 donations, from BAE employees. The first was a $70 donation for the Grassmere Town Hall Restoration Fund from Wayne Tremor. And the second donation was from an anonymous BAE employee for $32.62 to go to the Heritage Fund.
Thank you.
Move to accept.
Thank you. Motion to accept the donations?
Second?
Seconded by Collis. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's 10 minutes past 6. This board's available for public comment. There's no one here this evening, but it is an opportunity for the public to present their concerns and comments to the board for 3 minutes of any item that's not on the agenda. Not having any public here at this present time, we'll move into the town administrator's report.
Well, thank you. The first item you have is your weekly meeting schedule, with the Budget Committee meeting on Tuesday, Conservation Commission on Wednesday. The HTC has canceled their meeting for Wednesday. And then Thursday, both the Planning Board and Solid Waste Commission will be meeting.
We have a conflict, I believe, for Tuesday night's meeting, our representative for budget. You're not available, Scott, as you're the normal representative. I'm a backup, and I'm not available.
I have a conflict on Wednesday. I'm the selectman's rep for the Concom. I cannot make that meeting, but I'd be happy to switch for the Tuesday night meeting.
I don't think it's a holiday, so I can't do that.
I'm cooking tomorrow night for about 30 people for the fire chief.
So, Collis, can you represent us at the budget?
Yes, tomorrow at 7.
And
Maybe Phil can.
let me see what my calendar says for Wednesday. I'm good, Wednesday evening.
You got a deal.
Thank you.
And we're no changes necessary for the planning board and solid waste. Consensus folder, Derek.
Yes, consensus folder, you have your accounts payable manifest in the amounts of $212,253.28. The payroll and withholding manifests in the amounts of $141,353.60. There's also grant acceptance paperwork for the CLG grant in the amount of $7,830. Those are funds that a public hearing and a vote to accept was done by this board on the 6th of August. There is the $70 deposit voucher for the Grassmere Town Hall Restoration Fund, which was voted on earlier this evening, and then a 2013 ballot for the New Hampshire Association of Assessing Officials as well.
Motion to approve the consensus folder.
Second.
Any discussion?
A question?
Yes.
What is the 2013 ballot from the Hampshire Association of Assessing Officials? What is that?
There is a ballot in there, and the town assessor is on that ballot
That's right.
for.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, thank you.
Okay, No further discussion. Those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. 4-0. And correspondence. Thank you.
There's a letter from the Goffstown Main Street seeking authorization for their annual artwork show from October 12th through December 7th. Traditionally, you've received a standard letter that the town is not liable for the security of the artwork. And then they're also requesting to use Town Hall for the Pumpkin Regatta for Saturday, October 13th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sunday the 14th from noon to 3. And Sue has asked if anyone would be able to unlock the building on that Saturday and Sunday as well.
I can do it.
To unlock.
Unlock, whatever.
And secure at the end of the day as
Yeah,
well.
that's not a problem. I'll be here.
And I'm probably around the village
be
area
around,
too
so.
myself, and you know my cell number then.
So, you need a motion on the approval on the artwork, right?
Yes.
Motion to approve Goffstown Main Street's request for the display of artwork at Town Hall from October 12th through the 7th.
Second?
Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
4-0. We have some assessors' recommendations.
Yes, you have the assessor has recommended timber tax operations for yield taxes on map 5, lot 92A, and a 2009 tax year abatement on map 38, lot 8.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, is it unusual for him to be clearing up 2009 records? It is going a stretch back, but I don't need an answer on that. Okay, a motion on the assessor's recommendations then.
Motion was made by Mark, second by Scott.
Okay, those in favor of the motion indicate, say aye.
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 4-0. Okay, getting complicated now. Records retentions policy.
Yes, you have a records retention policy. We have a records retention committee in town. This is the statutory authority in RSA 33A, and the group has been meeting since January of this year to look at not only the records retention here at Town Hall, but the records retention town-wide. And the committee has worked with input from the various departments around town and also provided the copy of the retention policy to the department heads for comment on the policy that the town would follow, as well as an attached retention schedule that comes right out of the records retention law, and then a litigation hold notice should the town or department receive notice of pending litigation. It says this has not been reviewed by legal, but if you felt it was warranted, we can send it to the town attorney.
Well, my first reaction, Derek, is that I'd like an opportunity to ask some questions of department heads in this coming week. Is this an item that we can review?
Absolutely, we anticipated this is a lengthy document, and we anticipated this would be the first time you'd be seeing it.
Is this the first time such a policy has been, very lengthily and documented like this?
In the past, there was the actual retention schedule, which was adopted, I believe, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. That was adopted and has been followed, but I think there's been some clarification, and we've just kind of tried to polish it a little bit.
But this time there's textual policies to go with the retention chart.
Yes, yes.
Scott?
Unless our policy has been drafted from like model language that has had legal review, I would feel more comfortable having our attorney review the policy for adoption. simply because there's too much legal liability with these types of, with record retention policies. If we don't adhere to it, or if we create too strict of a standard or too lenient of a standard. I mean, a lot of it is based upon RSA, no doubt. But how we approach the policy, how we self-audit, those types of things can be problematic if not done correctly. So that's just, I think Drescher should review it.
Is that a consensus with the board
Yeah.
to have the town attorney review this document? So, proceed with that, Derek.
Yes, sir.
And the board members can do their own review and questioning of department heads for their records, and whenever we get the attorney's comments back, we can bring this back to the table.
Also, if you're also interested in how this has been going, the minutes of the record retention policy are online, so you can check those out as well and see.
Were you part of this?
Yes.
I don't know if I missed it or not, so I just tried to skim it over again. Is there something in the policy that states that the department head has to have an annual review of the policy with all employees?
No, I don't believe that there was, nothing that I recall.
Okay, I mean, to me, that would be a basic minimum.
Okay.
Because if it's gonna get challenged by an outsider, they're gonna wanna know, what do you do to make sure that your employees are knowledgeable about this policy? And if you just have it, but yet you don't explain it to them or don't provide them a copy of it, so I would think that minimally, if someone new is brought on, that they immediately get a copy of it, and it's explained by their supervisor, and then every year there's like an annual, refresher course with respect to that,
Okay.
Those are very good points to put in the document. One for new employees, the second one an annual review, perhaps in some particular month that it would be conducted
Okay.
for all department heads. And could those words be drafted before the attorney sees this document?
We could draft something. Would you prefer it to come back to this board before going to, or just,
No.
or
If
include,
you-
add those in and?
I would be comfortable if you address those two facets with the committee, and
Okay.
then include them in the document, and then release it.
Absolutely. So it was the annual review by departments and then training, or, providing
Yeah.
this to new employees?
Yes.
Yep, yeah, we can add that. I'll bring that to the committee.
Thank you, Scott. Now, I see, Derek, we have a design for the floor above this, a floor above us.
Yes, we've
Proposed
been working with the architect,
Redesign of the,
the
I
upper,
guess what you call the second floor of this building,
yes.
half light up.
Yes, and this takes into account, we believe, some of the concerns raised by the board when this first came to your attention, and also some of the staff concerns. And this is a little bit of amalgam of the last plan provided by the architect and some ideas we had drawn up. The red walls would be new, and then those red rectangles would be customer service windows. So again, the interaction would be through those customer service windows.
Yeah.
And then there would be almost like a back hallway through connecting all the buildings, or all the offices on the north side of the building.
And the revenue collection office, those are also customer interface windows.
Yes, they are.
They just weren't colored red.
Correct, yes. Those were existing that the architect had drawn in, but this would provide for more space for the revenue collection, which was one of their primary concerns. Also some area for the supervisors, a checklist for their area.
This had, for Selectmen Adams and Lemay, this is a subject that was before the board, I believe, before your term. And the revenue collection portion that we're attempting to put in place was in a different location on that floor. And we weren't totally happy with it, so we asked for it to go back for another design. And we asked, basically, as you see it now. Okay, supervisor of the checklist, where is their facility?
It is, as you're looking at the sheet to the left of the revenue collection, that it's labeled SOC, and they would have an area in there, and which would be basically part of the revenue collection office in there, but off to the side. And we'd also work with the architect if there's a partition that needs to go in there to quell any secure or privacy concerns between revenue collection. But we felt that since they have a similar function to some of the clerk functions, that would be the most logical place to put them.
Mm-hmm. And one of the goals is the revenue collection side of the building is then more secure than it is presently.
Absolutely, yes.
What are you looking for from the board this evening?
Feedback, and also if the consensus of the board that this is an agreeable way to move, we would go back to the architect to have them iron out any issues with this plan and come back with a formal drawing and construction cost estimates.
What vetting has been done with the town hall staff?
We have worked through the different iterations of the plans, and we've taken their concerns into account as we've designed this.
No one ready to quit yet, though. Okay, that's good. Selectman Lemay, you had a comment?
So just looking at the revenue collection section, Derek, section 4,
Yes.
I understand that there's gonna be 4 windows, and these collection windows, when people come up to the counter or to that area, they'll be standing, is that my understanding, in the hallway, looking into a window, paying a bill?
Yes. Yes.
Just doesn't sit very well with me. I mean, customer relations, personal satisfaction, I mean, everybody walking by to any one of these offices here now is going to hear what you, me, and everybody else is talking about. I mean, personally, I mean, if you're asking for my opinion,
We did, I know where you're headed on that, Mark. We did have an earlier discussion on that feature, and there could be a note signage that if a person wants to have a private discussion, then there's a door immediately available that they can have the person come into the backside of the room.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, the goal would, again, and this is guidance we've gotten out of the Department of Labor, is to keep a separation between the employees, because I know safety was one of the chief concerns of the selectmen. And that space that is labeled general assistance would be a private meeting space, not only for that function, but as well as the assessing clerk, who meets with people on some of the different deferrals and exemptions.
Also for property tax clerk, many times people want to speak privately to the property tax person.
So it shows a door leading into there with 2 chairs,
Yes.
looking at the counter, and then there's a window
Yes.
in between.
Yes.
And these are all secure windows, bulletproof,
Yes.
high security windows.
Yes.
Where would our public assistance person, wouldn't it be sitting in that room full-time then?
They would be when they are taking, when they have scheduled appointments with clients or meeting with clients, but currently that is, Evelyn also works in the finance department, so she would be down the other end.
So that the general assistance room, as indicated in this diagram, would really be available for public assistance and any of the revenue functions where somebody wants to have a little bit more privacy discussing their aspects with one of the clerks.
Yes.
Yes.
The administrative selectman number 1, that red rectangle, is that a window? What is that?
That would be a window as well, again.
A service window?
A service window.
And what about the 2 smaller red rectangles on the town administrator 1
Those would be walls that are replacing doors that
Oh,
currently
okay, so you're
exist.
closing off a door.
To closing off
Yeah,
those,
okay.
yes.
And essentially, because the new doors along the exterior wall, by default, it forms a corridor or access among all the rooms for the staff, from one end all the way through to the other end. Selectman Rose.
I have a couple of comments. One, the general, all the way to the left, the general assistance area. I've done these designs before. The space that you have, those two chairs with a window, that's really cold, very impersonal, and I don't think we should even, I don't think that's a great approach. Personally, I would think you'd want to shift that wall further up, further, so you're creating a small room that again is only accessible, from the outside. So from in terms of security, whoever is here can't get into the general work area. Yes, it does leave your employee in a spot where, they're in a room with these folks, but that's that. You put in a buzzer or if there's that type of thing. But I would think you'd have a very small, room where you can meet with somebody with a small table, have paperwork, things like that. So I think this room, one, needs to get tweaked. Secondly,
So a person using that room would shut the door behind them, to make it a secure room.
right,
But you're suggesting it does not need an interior wall in that room?
I don't think it does. Or if it does, you should move it back to create more space. I don't think that one particularly needs one. I think when you're doing this type of work, I would think that you'd want to be face to face with somebody. They want to. It just seems very cold. If that's what we want to go, and that, I understand why you have transaction counters. There's public safety. I completely get it. But do we want everything to be like that? And I think general assistance is one that usually lends itself for people.
So sitting across a table with the public, the clerk sitting across the table from their customer is a more friendly approach. Maybe presenting documents to each other.
Well, how do I put it? General assistance is going to take you longer than getting a car registration. So it's, in terms of, I look at revenue collection as more transactional in nature. The transactions probably take anywhere from 5, maybe 10 minutes tops, if that. Whereas general assistance might take half an hour to an hour where you're with somebody. So I think the very nature of that is, I don't think you want a window in that situation. I think you want a table where you can sit down that's somewhat comfortable and people can feel relaxed. The other one is more transactional. You don't need to provide them that type of comfort, I guess. But the problem that I have with the revenue collection piece as it's drawn out, and I do like the concept of having, of what, combining all that stuff and having 3 or 4 people all in the same area where they can kind of all do each other's job and help out. I think it's great. My concern is the queuing of people and the privacy in the hallway, as Mark mentioned, because right now we really don't. There is a certain degree of privacy because whether you're in the tax collector's office, for an example, more often than not, if somebody's there at the counter, somebody else, they might be there, but more often than not, they'll be waiting maybe in the hallway, so there's a little bit of privacy. So I think you lose a little bit of that, and I don't. The other thing too that I've noticed is that upstairs we have chairs, so that when it gets really busy, people actually sit down in those chairs as they're waiting. Where are you, what are we going to do? Are we going to put a bench out there for people to? There's only so much space in that hallway.
We'll have those long lines in the hallway.
Right.
On certain days
So,
of the week.
My thought process is that if we're going to keep it there, then think about potentially offsetting that. Then take away 3 or 4 feet to bring those closer in. Yes, you'll lose some space in here, but at least you'll create a place where people can you can then put benches along this wall, and then people can sit and wait. If that's the approach that you're going to take. But I think it would, I would recommend losing 3 or 4 feet.
Interesting concept you just brought up is each one of these windows could be a little 3-foot deep alcove.
Correct.
So you are isolated from the flow in the hallway, and you're more.
Correct. Yep. That's my point, is that if you offset them.
That would still
then at least
retain.
you're getting that little bit of privacy
That would
right
still
then and there
retain
with your
the
next
weight.
person. And then if you're waiting, maybe you'll sit on a bench, or something, but.
And that would still allow I presume the hallway wall is weight-bearing, so that would still allow the wall to be there, but a little alcove.
Right, and I think even though you're gonna bring this up, to here, you're gonna lose a little bit of space, but you've got plenty of space here and here to make up for it,
Like, I agree, you gotta provide some seating.
Yeah.
If you're here and there's 10 people in front of you, you're gonna be standing in the hallways, but the doors, if this is accurate, the doors into what is now the planning counter there swing out into the hallway, so you could easily put benches along there without giving up.
They lay flat against the wall when
Right.
you're open.
They do.
Yeah, so this drawing's wrong. They do swing flat.
Yep.
But you can't put a bench right,
They still swing, oh, I see, they swing flat back against.
Yes.
Well, they could still,
but you're still, right, but you could not put a bench where that door swings open.
until they get by the door.
Right.
And for Mark and Collis, in the hallway, on the far left, you see a petition with a door, and that would be a new door for fire.
Yeah.
Now, I made a comment when this first came up that I don't like that door opening into the center. It needs to be more centered towards the staircase.
Okay.
Which
What,
one? Which door?
perhaps a fire safety expert needs to,
You're talking about the one for
the one on the left, just before you reach a staircase going to the exit. I'm uncomfortable with that door being so close to the staircase and off-centered. Is that a hazard?
Why did it have to be there in the first place?
It's prevent airflow from the basement getting
Oh,
up to the
okay.
first floor.
They're looking for a separation as far as if any of the smoke's gonna travel upstairs, they need to try to separate.
These doors
The-
would be magnetically released.
I don't, this is just my opinion, for design purposes, is that if that is a functional thing for fire separation or smoke or et cetera, then you have a lot of nice bright light up there. And as soon as you do that, you're gonna kill all that light. So I think if you're gonna do that, you wanna put like glass
Glass
on
protection,
both sides, then
Oh,
with your
yeah.
door, not just a wall.
They really look at, it's the fire rating, not,
Right.
so, yeah, I think
Could
glass
you-
would be,
Glass will work.
Yeah.
right?
Glass
No,
will
as
work.
I'm saying, it does bring in a lot of nice natural light in
Yes, it does.
that you would
From
lose.
both
from
ends of the
both-
hallway.
Right.
Mr. Chair? Looking at the Revenue Collection Center again, as Derek mentioned, for safety and protection of our people that are there, there's gotta be glass windows there, so people have that conversation
Right.
to and from, right? I mean, let's give them the best protection we can give them. If we're gonna put them there, let's put bulletproof glass there as well. I mean, somebody could flip a who knows what, and,
Well, I heard that's what it was
That
gonna be.
was part of the.
yeah, but
I just wanna say that we've talked about that, I just don't know if it's ever been agreed upon. There is a significant cost to that. I think before we,
yeah, but correct me, the red, is that new wall, new safety glass, or what is that?
the thick red is what we envisioned as similar to the revenue collection space, service windows.
right,
All right, okay. Service windows.
Some portions of this diagram had already been discussed and incorporated into a design, so you don't see it as red being a new feature, but could have been.
was there, there was some consensus from the employees who were on this that it would be glass, no glass, bulletproof glass, what was the?
We didn't get to that level of
just
discussion.
a
More
separation.
was,
Okay,
more was focused on the amount of workspace that the revenue collection office and those offices that were being combined to go in there
Yeah.
would still have enough space for all their records that they now maintain.
all right. I do have some reservations on the bulletproof glass, and I'm just trying to be that balance between employee safety and it not looking like it's a,
Well, no,
Prison.
I understand, but I
Oh.
mean, we're looking out for our employees.
no,
and-
a case in point, like when you go into the PD, right?
Yep,
you've got your 2 counters. It's pretty cold.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, let's face it, I mean, it's cold, but it has a right to be cold. It's a police station, you know, I mean, so, I mean, this is a town hall, and I know that the crazy people do crazy things, but we're gonna be going potentially from just a transaction counter with no glass to potentially a transaction counter that looks like more, and functions more like PD.
It should be, well, I mean.
'Cause that's
I
what
would-
it'll
I-
look like.
I would hope not. I mean, I would hope that the front of this counter looks somewhat like a bank.
Yeah.
You know, have a nice,
Right, but even banks don't have, like, when you go to TD Bank North, or, I mean, others, they don't have
see what
that.
Father Time has to say.
Selectman Devanza, who arrived at 6:30, welcome.
I thought it was interesting coming in on a conversation, mentioning bulletproof glass and everything, and only thing that I was gonna, suggest is if nobody here has been there yet, that it might be wise or it might be worthwhile to, go down to, Manchester City Hall and see how it is on the lower level when you go in, to a situation similar to this where they have glass. I don't think they have bulletproof glass, but the glass is only halfway up anyway. But if you went to the Manchester City Hall, I think it has that certain amount of separation that you have there. You don't have, because and you do have 2 ways of coming in, because you have the entrance that's through the hallway where the elevator is forward, and then you have, when you're coming in from the annex entrance on that side. But I think that is, that provides a balance between what we're kind of, you know, trying to have here, where you do separate it, you do have a certain amount of security, but you also don't have that coldness that you have, as you mentioned, when you go into PD and when you're in records or you're trying to go in there. So I think that look in the Manchester City Hall, for my part, I think is acceptable. And I think it's acceptable, would be acceptable to the residents or people who have to use the facility.
Derek, I believe the Town Hall of Lincoln is a relatively new structure compared to many of our town halls in New Hampshire, and it has a revenue collection window. And when I walked through the town hall, it appeared to be very well-lit and friendly to approach. Ask if there's any pictures that they could forward to you,
Okay.
or architectural diagrams.
I go to the one in Bedford occasionally, and they also have, I think, 3 or 4 transaction windows. They're not bulletproof, as far as at least I don't think they are. But yet, but it does address the concern about the queuing, because sometimes you go in there and there's 6 or 7 people online, and that's one of the issues that I'm a little bit concerned about, is that queuing, where right now where the clerk's office is, they queue in that little area, and then they queue outside, sometimes in the hallway. So I think we just have to be a little bit.
Well, then they do queue, and there is no privacy.
Right.
They're all,
Yeah.
you know, well,
So,
the property tax.
so I just think that slightly offsetting it and then creating those little
I like that.
partition areas would solve that problem to a degree of at least the privacy piece.
The little alcove to speak
Right.
in need only be 20 to 24 inches deep.
Right.
I don't
But
even
it
think you need
gets the
that much.
person, it gets the person out of the flow of the hallway.
Yeah.
I don't think you even quite need that much. I think you can get by with 12 or 16 inches.
I'm sure.
Just
there's
enough to set back.
Just
a
might
little.
be an architectural standard if they research it. That's right.
Yeah. But other than that, seems to work.
We're getting closer.
I think
But-
we have some good feedback to continue on.
Then we'll wrap up the discussion then on the proposed revenue collection office design.
And I know there's a lot of discussion.
Closing comments.
My closing thing would be the bathrooms. I mean, if you're gonna renovate space, has there been any discussion about updating the bathroom?
Yes,
At the
the
same time.
plans there would make them ADA compliant.
Okay.
Because
I didn't see any red, so they're being refurbed, but they wouldn't be,
Yes,
They were changed under a previous version of this
okay.
chart.
Yeah, the red on here are the changes that staff made
Okay.
versus what
Room.
the architect.
I guess room 205 and 207 are redesigned
Yes, they
Alright.
are.
from their present configuration.
Correct.
Derek, you have a discussion concerning our potential purchase of a diesel.
Yes. At a previous meeting, the board authorized the town administrator to lock in diesel, and it is continuing to fall, and the town administrator is not available this week. So she's asking for you to give that authorization to the finance director, Don Borer, to lock in if rates are favorable.
Is he willing to do it?
He is.
Okay, just check it.
Is this because we anticipate quite possibly a bottoming of the rates this week? And that's
They have been coming down the last couple of weeks. Our current contract is for $3.25 a gallon. Last week's quote was for $3.42, which I think the height was in the 360s, 368. Sue and Don have both had lengthy conversations about trying to lock in around $3.25.
Make a motion to authorize the finance director to negotiate and enter into contract for diesel fuel.
in the absence of the town administrator.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there a second, or?
Yeah, I seconded it for discussion. There's always this, everybody, every time we've gone through this, even Sue gets really anxious over, in terms of pulling the trigger on this thing. And I can only imagine that Don will even be more nervous about, should I pull the trigger? Is this the, you know? And I think if our motion would be slightly changed to say that any rate in between our current contract rate of $3.25 and the current quote of $3.42 gives him the ability to say, okay, I can do this, or if it's under $3.42 or I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Because no one's Nostradamus here on this one except for you. You've predicted it, but so unless he's going to call you and get your opinion, I want him to be able to feel like he can pull the trigger without having to wait. You know.
Well, then why are we putting a restriction on? Because the concern that I have is if he's talking to the diesel supplier, and the diesel supplier tells him, gee, and we give a range,
Yeah.
and the diesel supplier tells him, I don't think it's gonna go below this, and it's 1 penny above what we give him the range, he says, I can't do it. And then next time he comes in, and now we're 25, 30 cents above, because it started going back up, so I would rather not put the restriction on it.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we all know that the
It's
way
a
the
commodity,
market is.
so, yeah, I mean, okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? And we have a motion to provide finance director the authority to purchase, enter into a contract for diesel. Those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. We're back to 5 zeros again, Catherine. We have the agenda item is 7. It looks like it'll be able to go on as scheduled. With Selectman Devanza here, let's do our catch-up on minutes. Turn to section 2 in our tab. We have minutes for the 10th of September, and that was public and non-public for the 10th of September.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Did anybody note any need for corrections on the 10th of September?
I did not.
Those in favor of the motion, indicate by say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we have minutes from last week, 17 September, public and non-public.
Motion to accept.
Second?
Any need for corrections or discussion?
None that I saw.
Did a good job, Catherine. Those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 I'm going to abstain.
We'll attempt to go through old business, new business. I have one item on old business.
I have one as well.
Thank you. I represented this board this last weekend, 21 September, at the New Hampshire Municipal Association Legislative Policy Conference. It was held at the local government center in Concord. And on the agenda was a discussion of various policies, and all the policies were classified as for action by the New Hampshire Municipal Association as what they called action. That meant they were be active participants in crafting an RSA. Some were labeled as priority, which meant that they would participate as resources would be available, or they were standing policies, and they would always be alert to any changes in those conditions. This board decided how I would vote on all those proposals at our sessions on 9 and 16 July. Anyways, it turned out there were 31 proposals in the area of general government and revenue and intergovernment relations. This board's position was to support 25 of them, and we opposed 6 of them. The members at the conference voted to support all 31. So there were 25 proposals in the municipal administration and finance area. Our position was to support all 25, and that's how the conference voted. Lastly, there were 12 proposals in the area called planning and environmental quality. This board's position was to support all 12, and that's how the conference voted. There were 2 proposals offered on the floor. One was from the Hanover representative, a proposal indicating that trust funds be changed from income-only distribution to total return distribution. And that phrase, total return distribution, is, I've been told, is well defined in accounting manuals. Anyways, it was approved. It was discussion for at least 15 minutes on the floor, and it was approved. The representative from Alton made a proposal indicating that the automatic dial alerts conducted by town and school offices, when that alert is addressing the issue of voting dates and hours, it should be sent to all available voters, not to a restricted list of voters.
That failed.
It failed. The background on that was using the snow alert from a school system, alerting parents of students that there's a vote tomorrow. And there may have been, I'm only assuming, there may have been a school-sensitive issue that they were looking for turnout. So that failed. And it appears to me, having these policy conditions submitted 2 months prior to the conference, that allowed the conference or the staff and the committee to fully discuss these policies, to vet them, to reword them well. And that was sort of a foolproof way of getting their approval. Floor motions are more risky, and they would have to be very concise in wording. They have to be inherently very needed and easy to explain. So I thank the board for the opportunity to represent you at the conference. I know I was a substitute for Selectman Devanza, who's had this honor for many years. I appreciate the exposure.
Quite welcome.
Now, I'm sure you were quite versed in the methods of this conference, and I can understand why you were reluctant to oppose this board opposing certain policies. Because what that meant, the method of voting at this conference is the entire slate of policies are voted on at one time, presuming if the vote would be in the affirmative. And if you cared to differ with that vote, you had to have the policy withdrawn from the slate. So you have to stand up and withdraw it from the slate. And you obligated me to do that, because that was the vote of this board. Then I had to be the first speaker to persuade all the other members to come around to my version of why I opposed it. So it was a memory test for me as to why this board discussed certain issues 2 months earlier. So I attempted, but in the end, all the other 65 members there voted for it, and I voted against it. I'm looking forward to you doing that honor again next year.
Thank you.
And now I understand the conditions why you were opposing. You did not wish to have so many opposed. Scott, you had an item.
Yeah, we've been, I guess, trying to address our social media policy for quite a long time. And I just like to see us get a little bit more and get this thing approved. I think it's a great way to show transparency in the public. It's a great way to get messages out. And it's something that's long overdue. I think we're making more of this than it actually is. We've already, as a board, we've already discussed the major issue, and that is that we're not going to allow posts on social media sites. It's just going to be simply a push of information, and I just don't see why it's taking this long. There are guidelines from LGC. They've issued some publications with respect to it, and I just don't think that should take, years to develop. I think we can turn this thing around in, very, very short order. The library, Goffstown Public Library, uses social media. They are managed by the Board of Trustees. They're doing a very capable job of that in terms of getting announcements to different programs that they have, et cetera. Works extremely well. They're a resource for us in town in that respect. And there are just tremendous opportunities for us to leverage social media, more so probably in Parks and Recreation than in some of our other departments. But then again, whether it's dog registrations, whether it's whether or not you regarding burn permits or anything, it's a great way for a department to send out a note on social media and for folks to get informed. I believe now that 40 to 45% of people who have a cell phone now have a smartphone. So it's something where people are checking their Facebook or Twitter accounts, things of that nature, and it's more and more of folks are doing that. It's a tool that we really need to embrace, and we're slow right now. We got to jump on this thing.
Derek, you had a hand in crafting that policy a few months back.
Right.
Yes.
Could you bring it back to the table for our next session?
Absolutely.
I thought we were really close.
We've made the final tweaks.
Okay.
We believe we have all the department's support at this point, and we will be bringing it back.
Okay.
We had to make a few last-minute tweaks, but yeah, we will bring it back.
And I concur with your last comment, Scott. Having purchased a new cell phone for my wife last week, and I did that online, and there were 70, my particular provider had 72 models available, and 71 of them were on the order of smartphones, and only one of them was simply a...
What'd you get?
I'm not going to make an announcement.
You got the non-smartphone? The non-smartphone?
Got the new Apple 5.
Even Phil has a smartphone. You have the i5, right? Apple 5.
Is there any
That's what he gets.
any other old business? Any new business to be discussed?
I did have one item. I received an email from Kurt Lauer on behalf of the Hillside Methodist Church, and I'll read the email, it's not very lengthy. At our church, the town owns the front lawn area where we have our roadside sign and a few small flower beds. This is the area we talked about actually when we were talking about plowing parking lots for houses of worship. We said, no, it's town owned anyways. The parking area, this is that grassed area, the green space between the church and Center Street. They'd like to increase the size of the two flower beds to about 8 foot by 20 foot each, intend to use the cut flowers for the vases we deliver to the residents at Bel Air Nursing Home on their birthdays, anniversaries, etc. So I assume we should get some sort of formal town approval, even though we have maintained that area by mowing, weeding, etc. for years. And then as a follow-up, he says, we'd also thought about planting a vegetable garden to help supply the network food pantry. We're not sure about this one since we'll likely lose most of the ripe produce to late-night drive-by harvesters. But could you include that in the discussion as well? Personally, I've given it some thought. I don't have a problem with expanding the size of the gardens there. I think it's nice green space. I think the more color and the more green space they can bring anywhere in town, I think is a good thing. I'm not so sure about the vegetable garden. They tend to become unruly and late in the season as the vegetation's dying off. It just seems to me as though that might be going a little bit too far, but again, I told them I'd bring the full concept to the board for consideration, so.
This would be an island of land in the front of their church.
Correct.
And they're asking the board's permission because it's part of it, or part of all of it would
It's all
be
on town land.
town land.
Yeah. They currently have flower beds in there, and now they want to
Might be in
expand
the
that.
district.
I'm sorry.
It might be in the district, too, historic district.
Meaning-
Well, historic district would have to look at
Well, sure, I see.
the appearance. They're
Yeah.
concerned with the appearance of
Right.
the district.
Historical flowers you need, Phil, or
Yeah.
what?
Would have to be historic granite or something like that.
You know, without seeing what it is, I mean, I can't say whether or not it does. I'm just pointing out that
Would,
it's in the
would the
district.
board like to have a well-drawn diagram of the extent of this defined area?
It's a sizable area. I didn't realize, I kind of had this image of it, but I drove by the other day, and it's a pretty sizable area.
Yeah, drawing wouldn't hurt.
And, you know, let's face it, they're maintaining it. If they weren't doing it, it'd be left to the town to maintain it, and it is a tract.
Well, we could ask for the drawing if the board felt like it's,
Yeah.
well, we're
Yeah.
comfortable with them going in that direction, so we'd just like to see a drawing of the full extent, and we could then vet that with the historic district, Public Works.
Kurt's an architect, I'm sure he can come up with that sketch.
Okay.
Okay, I'll relay that message to him.
Consensus, the board, we're leaning in that direction.
All right, I'll relay the message to him. Thank you.
Any other new business? I'm gonna delay committee reports, because it's now 7 o'clock, and we're scheduled to continue our discussion for the budget presentations. We have presentations this evening for the, from the Sewer Commissioner and from Public Works Department. And first up appears to be the Sewer Commissioner with a viewing
Paid for by the
audience.
I
Please
understand.
identify yourself and we'll.
Good evening. My name's Jim Bouchard. I'm with the Commissioner with the Goffstown Sewer Commission. Have been for almost 20 years, I think. Appreciate the opportunity to come before
Thank you.
the Select Board to present and discuss our proposed budget for 2013. As many of you know, the Sewer Commission is an enterprise fund. It was established in 1952 by town vote, and we tend to operate under the RSA's very similar to the Board of Selectmen, except we have no power to bond. Therefore, we've always come before you folks for our warrant articles. We are a user-supported facility. That being said, we don't utilize tax dollars to maintain and operate or expand our facilities. The only thing we do utilize the town for is the ability to bond, and we have always repaid those bonds. So, that being said, we've undertaken some major expansions over the years, and we're in the process of just finishing one with the aid of the Department of Public Works on the Mass Road sewer upgrade. Before you, and with me tonight is our administrative assistant, Ellen Noyes. She has just distributed to you our proposed budget. We can walk you through, in a nutshell, the budget that we're proposing for 2013 is about $371,000 less than the budget that was proposed for 2012, fiscal year 2012, and adopted. And a lot of that relates to some of the later items relative to sewer operations with Manchester. But I would like to take the opportunity to walk you through some of the major changes between our budgets from 2012 to 2013. The sewer administration line items that you have before you, a number of these are set by the town finance department. They're provided to us relative to wages and benefits and that type of thing. Banking services is provided to us. We show which is line 45040. We show a reduction in that of $3,700 from last year to $3,000 this year based on input from the finance department. The line above that, I should mention, legal services. 2012, we had a line item of $10,000 for that budget. The board has opted to increase that to $12,500. That's related to, the expenses we see coming very quickly with the settlement or the finalization of our agreement with Manchester on the IMA, legal reviews. We've had some sewer projects that have required easements and this past year, and we also have a challenge to the board from one of our users relative to the applicability of flat rates. So we are seeking counsel on that. So we've opted for that to be raised just slightly. The next major change would be major change is sewer administration interest expense, which is the second from the bottom under the sewer administration. Last year, that was $141,114. This year, it's $61,770. That's a major reduction. The reason being for that is last year for the ARA-supported project, which is the Mass Road sewer project, there was a one-time large payment out on that of $89,000. So not having that this year and just going down to a routine has dropped that requirement down to our $61,000 based on all the interest expenses we have for our outstanding debt service. Last item, principal bond expense. Again, last year was $173,000. This year it's $169,000. And again, that's based on the scheduled outstanding debt service we have on the bonds. The three bonds that we are carrying right now are Moose Club Park, Knollcrest, and the Mass Road Sewer Improvement Project. Turning to your page 2, sewer operations. Excuse me. We did adopt a line designation rename, I should say, which is line 53220. Sewer operations. Prior to this, that had sewer operations dash sewer project engineering. Prior to that, that had just been sewer project, and there was a lot of confusion and conflict with a subsequent line, 54530, which was maintenance and repair. So what we did is that line is typically has always been used for engineering for any of our projects as they may come up. So we just renamed that. And we continue to hold a placeholder of $5,000 as we have has been our typical for the years, which is paid for professional engineering services to help us out. That includes rate studies or anything that we need to do during the course of the year. As time goes on, we have more reporting to EPA. We have a CMOM reports. We have other things that have to come up. So that some years we don't use it, some years we do. Excuse me, maintenance charges, which is $53,340. We took a slight reduction in that to $4,000 this year because of the amount of money that's actually been expended to date. Relatively low expenditures, and that has been typical over the years. Excuse me. Probably the big change that we see further down is the last line, sewer operations, Manchester O&M charges. Manchester is our designated facility for receiving our wastewater stream. It comes from two sources. One's the west side pump station, and the other one is for St. A's, discharges directly, and they go through a metering station. So we have 2 discharge points, everything goes to Manchester. As such, our IMA agreement, which was dated roughly the 1992, dictates the rate charges that we pay Manchester. That, as I mentioned previously, is in the restructuring and renewal program under the EPA NIPDES permit, National Pollutant Discharge permit, and has been ongoing now for nearly 4 years. Looking to be ratified, hopefully by all parties, at the end of this year or very early in 2013. We have gone through we've done the draft IMA, it has been reviewed by the town, it has come back to us with comments, been reviewed by our council. Now, all the towns that discharge to Manchester, including Londonderry, Bedford, and ourselves, and the Manchester's IMA agreement, all these are currently pending review by the state's attorney general at this point. As such, the sewer charges that we are faced not only include treatment of our wastewater stream, but also the maintenance and upgrade and sharing in the cost for capital improvements of the Manchester wastewater treatment plant. That plant is now some 35 years old and is going through a rather sizable 10-year program to update it and to bring it into compliance with the new requirements of EPA for their discharge permit. Originally, back in 2011, when we put together the 2012 budget, we looked at a value for that of about $1.3 million for our O&M and capital investment charges over there. Since then, with negotiations with Manchester and with Manchester getting some harder numbers through their design process of what the construction costs are, we have been able to show that our sewer operations currently would be about $930,600. That is still a very conservative number. We expect it to be somewhat less, but until the IMA is fully ratified by all parties, we are carrying that number, which still reflects a reduction. So the net total for our budget request that we're putting this year is $1,254,600. Page 3 is our appropriations and how we establish that. And again, being a user, excuse me, I jumped ahead. Sewer pump stations is page 3. And this is the cost for us to operate our capital in our, we have 3 pump stations in town. We have, the lighting, electricity, propane. Essentially, most everything on these is staying exactly the same. Most of our pump stations are getting very old. The oldest one is the East Union Pump Station, which was the primary treatment plant, and that's our main pumping station that transmits most of the wastewater from the community to Manchester. There was a reduction on telecommunications for that, which is line item 5310, excuse me. That had been appropriated right around $3,000 and has been reduced to $2,000. The reason being that during the course of this year, East Union was the only pump station that was operating on a wireless server, a wireless communication, Earthlink. We have since done away with the Earthlink connection and gone on with Fairpoint, as all our other pump stations, allowing us a savings of about $1,000 a year. So going through that, our appropriations, our request for sewer pump stations, and our total of the pages before, our actual appropriation is request is $1,668,065. So that is what we're looking for projected expenditures for next year. Again, page 4 now is our revenue stream. Major changes that occurred between 2013 and 2012 is under line item 39990, which is budgetary use of retained earnings. So last year in 2012, we utilized about a little over $608,000 of retained earnings to offset the budget, so we didn't have to do a major rate increase, knowing we had some the ARA project going forward with Mass Road and some projects down at Manchester, excuse me. This year, Now, we're not looking at utilizing that, so that budget request is at zero. And as you follow through, most of our monetary funds come from the sewer use charges that we have under sewer operations. We do charge accessibility, and working with the planning department, looking at what the future for 2013 might be for accessibility charges to users that want to connect to the system. What this is a fair, we would say fair assessment as to bringing them up to help pay for the infrastructure that they're going to be able to utilize for their benefit. So we have about $185,000 in that. And then we have some miscellaneous revenues that come in over time from, back people who are, back revenues that haven't been paid. So all told, our appropriations, our appropriations and our revenues balance out for $1,668,065 for fiscal year 2013. That's an abbreviated version. I certainly can go through it in more detail if it's the privilege of the board. Certainly entertain questions.
We have questions from Selectman Devanza?
Thank you. Jim, you mentioned the IMA, and for people listening that are familiar, that's the intermunicipal agreement, correct?
Correct, Phil. My apologies. Yes, you get caught with this government jargon so long,
I know.
it becomes a word on itself. Yes, IMAs are intermunicipal agreement. That's the agreement that sets the conditions for Manchester to treat our waste. It sets the conditions of what we can discharge. It sets the conditions for the waste stream. The condition of the waste stream, if certain items have to be excluded, like mercury and things like that. And it also sets the charges for what we will be paying for removal of reduction of the biological oxygen demand in the wastewater stream, the total suspended solids, and the treatment of the bacteria. So that's our IMA agreement, and it also dictates what our cost and fair share capitalization costs are.
Just to follow up, you mentioned the ratification of that. Could you just briefly explain the process and who does the actual ratification?
This is actually a document between the sewer commissioners and the Manchester wastewater, actually the City of Manchester Environmental Protection Division, which operates the wastewater treatment facilities in Manchester. So it is agreement. It is reviewed by the aldermen in Manchester. It is reviewed by us, and we make copies available to the selectmen for their review once we've gotten a couple of times. But what we do, once it has been through our review, is the initial draft. Actually, the initial draft comes out of Manchester. We go through it. We edit it. We propose revisions. Our legal, with legal assistance from our attorney. It goes back to Manchester. Manchester incorporates those. What they try to do is we have 3 towns with IMA agreements with Manchester. They're trying to balance it, so the IMA agreement, the base model reads the same for all 3 towns. The only specific changes relate to the treatment process that each town requires and of each of Manchester, specifically around flow, total suspended solids, and biological oxygen demand within the wastewater stream. So,
For those 3 factors, the 3 towns have different amounts of flow, different amount of
Suspended solids.
correct, Chairman.
And so the rates may vary by
The rates
those.
vary tremendously based on the need. One of the things is, one of our biggest needs has always been flow. Manchester.
Which is low or high?
Well, had been under the previous systems, under the IMA agreement that had been, that we've been operating on since the early 90s, they had always looked at peak flows and measuring it. So you were sort of penalized, actually you were penalized for peak flows.
Which occurs during storms.
I was just going to say, and our system is, our system is old. We have some pipes in the ground nearly 100 years old. And we've been working very hard to line those pipes. But during periods of very wet weather, we have 2 conditions that happen: infiltration and inflow. Inflow being sump pumps, roof drains, roof leaders, yard drains out behind a house that are connected into that nice little white pipe that goes out of the building and into our system. So we've in the past had some peaks, and especially during the Mother's Day floods, everybody remembers that, we got up to nearly 7 million gallons a day. Our flow at that time was our flow was, under the agreement, 2.4 million gallons per day. So we greatly exceeded that by, 3 times that. What has happened in the past is we've gotten a hand slap. We've been told that, we have to put a program to try to control that, put that forward to Manchester. Manchester reviews it. Under the new and current one, IMA, Manchester has now taken the policy, we're going to look at your median flows, because the peak flow can change daily. They run under the same, very similar conditions. So we've changed to a median flow, our average daily median flow, which is actually only about 500,000 to 600,000 gallons a day. So what we had was 2.4 million gallons a day. We're only using 500,000 or 600,000. We've been using that since the early 90s. It hasn't changed dramatically. So what we did is we looked at, in a way to keep our costs down with Manchester, how could we cut some of those costs that we pay for O&M? Because you pay, a lot of it is paid on, though you pay for the treatment that you actually utilize, capital investments are paid for based on your potential to discharge. So what we did is we reduced the actual flow that we had from 2.4 to 1.8 million gallons per day. We reduced our TSS and our BOT requirements. They're still relatively high for future needs for the community and expanding community, but what it does is save us a tremendous amount on the capitalization projects.
And, fine.
They were in a few years ago.
I got a side question, but it has nothing to do with the.
They were in a few years ago, and with all the charts and everything, when they went from the peak flows to the median flows, we had all the nice long charts that we had, that we went through.
We asked Manchester to come over. We had an all-boards meeting presentation, and we went through this with all the boards, and actually, a few years ago, I think it's almost now 4 years ago, Phil?
Yeah.
Something like that.
About that.
Yeah, we went through that and showed how Manchester was looking to reapportion all this, and we took advantage of this. Originally, the thought process was that if we're going to maintain peaking flow as the billable and as your O&M charge, we're going to look for more flow to cover some of our peaking flow. Manchester did their study, realized they don't have the capacity at the plant that they originally thought they did, so that was one of the problems. They went from 54 million gallons a day, I think it was down to 35 million gallons per day is what they actually can handle. So that forced a situation where Manchester said, we're going to look at median flow. Everybody has a peaking flow problem. Let's look at median flow and make that a more justifiable way of accounting for O&M charges and capitalization costs.
Thank you, Jim. Discussions on the sewer expenses and revenues.
You got a question?
Just one, well, two comments. One, thank you so much for what you do and the other commissioners. I know it's not a paid position. You've been doing it for a long time, and you're always well-versed in everything, Jim. So you and the other commissioners, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
For all that you do. What I'm most concerned about is it is an enterprise fund. Technically, we never change this. This is your budget. Now that is the budget committee. This is more of a courtesy type of review. So thank you for doing that. My one curiosity is the fact that we are, I guess, the backstop to bonds, and you have always paid your bonds. What does your fund balance look like in terms of? I think our auditor mentioned something that was pretty healthy.
It currently is considered very healthy. I don't have that exact number. Carolyn, do you know what?
I think it's probably about 1.4.
Between both accounts or just in one account, don't we?
That might be between both, maybe 1.5 between both.
Okay, we have about 1.5 million on capital reserves.
What was that? That's all I had.
Thank you. Thank you once again for all the budget discussion and the foresight of planning that. You have finished
Yes.
you finished the Mass Road sewer upgrade. And I just want to take a moment to thank for the commissioners for several years of effort to make that happen. And I want to remind the listeners the essential need for why that was accomplished. And I felt it was on sewer capacity.
It was on sewer capacity.
You could speak to the attributes of why all that was done.
It's been an issue for us for many, many years. That dollar value of $2.5 million has been a hard nut for us to get ourselves over to, because it is a lot of money. There used to be state aid grant that could contribute 20% of that. That disappeared. And the situation down there is some of those lines are very old. DPW is our resource in maintaining our system in town, and through DPW and their people, they've TV'd the lines, they've kept a record of them. Some of the lines had severe sags in them. The line was 12-inch diameter. There were sags, there was cracks in the pipes. It was just there. It could not handle any more flow. We have been able to work with planning department and on a couple of instances where we've done come up with some creative ideas how we can allow some new business to come in and some others to expand. What we've typically taken the premise is anybody coming in would have to go find some flow to take out somewhere in the system, and DPW knew where that could help out, and they would go do that. That was a requirement. I mean, if you're gonna come in and you want to discharge, you gotta take something out so we have room to put it in. And that was basically inflow and stuff. So it's been warranted for a long time. When the RF funding came around, quite frankly, the commissioners had kind of kicked around a couple of ideas. And for what, it didn't, one is we didn't probably even think we had the chance at it. And I guess this is where Carl Querim from DPW stepped up, and he's really the advocate that managed to get it through DES and bring it before to help us get it through and bring it, to get us the funding for this. And it was one of the largest, grant application, or a relief of principal that came down from for this type of project within the state. So
for the foreseeable future, if developer wanted to put up a structure or rebuild other structures, that first step would not be take flow away from somewhere else. You now have capacity to add.
We have capacity now to go, carte blanche, you can go in there, it works, it's brought
I
us
just want to
back
reinforce, that's good for economic development of the community.
the whole corridor now economically can develop as nature permits it to.
As long as it's not filled up with housing,
Correct. Yeah,
multifamily housing.
And one of the assessments we looked at from the commission standard point of view, when we were looking at maybe reducing some of our flow to Manchester and help cut down on our capitalization costs, we looked at our consultant years ago had looked at it, as most consultants did back during the facilities planning stages in the 70s, where do you want to go? And a lot of it was the very rural agricultural districts of town. And that's never been really developed, and it's not and at this point, I can say with all confidence, it's the position of this commission, this board, that we're not looking to expand for more residential. We have a couple of areas we know that could be prone to some environmental need in the future because of density and failing septic systems, but right now we're looking at trying to assist the town for economic development.
I didn't mean, as far as the commissioners using the capacity to expand into residential portions of Goffstown. What I meant was the expanded capacity and the potential now in the Penardville section. This would be nice if it's used for commercial, industrial, rather than multifamily units being built in those.
Fully
areas.
understood.
That
I
was
just
my-
wanted to advance it.
Not directed anything against the
Nope.
commissioners or
None taken.
what their planning is. I was just a general comment.
Is that a paid political advertisement?
It might be.
Jim, thank you for answering our, I'm going to extend it just for a moment here. We do have some Budget Committee members in the audience back here. Got any questions for Jim? You're welcome to ask. Jim, thank you for being
Okay.
here this evening.
Thank you all. Have a
Excellent
great evening.
presentation.
Thank you very much.
5-minute break.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. We've got a request for a 5-minute break in our session here this evening before Public Works.
Yeah, he's leaving the helicopter for PD.
After a 7-minute break, We're back, and the agenda item for the selectmen this evening is the Public Works budget for fiscal year 2013. Kyle Quorum, welcome to the board here this evening.
Thank you very much.
And you've got several pages of presentation material. Lead us through it.
All right. What I put together here, I start off with just a few comparison graphs. These are kind of overall summaries. First of all, the first page, what I'm showing here is, you know, DPW consists of three main operational budgets. We take care of the cemeteries. There's public works operations, solid waste operations, and then, of course, our share of the capital projects. And as the board and the budget committee are aware, DPW is usually the lion's share of the town side of capital, because that's more or less what we do. The reason I put this graph in, I think it's a rather telling graph. What it shows, I think, pretty clearly is, you know, operations has held fairly steady over the last 5 years. The reason you see the blip between 2010 and 2011, there were a couple of anomalies that happened then. One, we shifted some capital cost into operating. That was just a decision the CIP committee had suggested, because some of the things that we've been carrying in capital looked and smelled more like annual operations, so we made those adjustments. We also had some spikes in things like diesel costs and other things that added up. In our paving line, our paving budget got a bump that year because of a last-minute addition that the budget committee had made to the budget. So those, but if you take out that blip between 2010 and 2011, what you see is operationally a fairly flat line. You see a shrinking capital budget over several years, and of course, what I say, I've said it for years, and it's just the unfortunate truth of infrastructure work. It does not fix itself. Vehicles do not get better with age. When you defer capital projects or you defer vehicle replacements, you're just rolling a snowball down the hill, and the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we clearly see in 2013, which I fully expect we'll have a lot of healthy discussion about, because I know the town only has so much money. But what we as a town have in front of us here is a very large problem. And we need to kind of work together to solve the problem, because as the CIP committee and the planning board concluded, we just can't keep deferring these projects. We can't keep deferring these needs. So you end up with this rather enormous spike in capital expenditure. The next graph is really a breakout of broad categories of how.
If I could just interject and let the viewing audience know, you're presenting us with 5 years of history on data, broken into 4 major components. One was your cemetery costs, which is that little dark thin
Tiny
line
blip.
at the bottom
Yes,
of the
it is.
graph you can hardly see. The bulk of your normal expenditures is called public works operation, and you explained how that is effectively quite stable over 5 years, with a change in a budgeting line that occurred in between 10 and 11. You had your solid waste operations. That's the transfer station, and that's relatively in the same ballpark, give or take 100,000. And you spent a lot of time, as you should, talking about the capital improvement projects, decreasing from 2.6 million to 2 million, to 1.5 million, to 1.4 million, and then a significant proposal because we can't kick the can down the road any further or keep doing so, we have to start addressing those needs. And this is, it's your job to put those needs in front of this board. And that's what you're doing this evening. And so potentially it could be 5 million, but we'll have a lot of discussion on that, as you said.
And, you know, just I guess so that the board and the viewing public knows, I'd be happy to, and I think we should, put these slides kind of somewhere in the minutes
Yes.
or on the web or make them available.
As some people do know, all of the reading material that the board has available to us, we pick up the hard copy of our discussion items on Friday night or Saturday or Sunday. But all of that reading packet that we have available to us is also available over the internet at the town's website on a folder called Minutes, and then under that, Selectmen, and in that, there's two major components. One is the minutes that have already been taken, but then the agenda items that were our read-ahead packages. So at some point, we'll have to find a way of presenting these types of charts you're doing onto our town's website. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. The next graph is really just to highlight probably the major difference between DPW and almost every other department in town. When you distribute the costs or you look at how we spend the money that the taxpayers entrust us with, most of the departments are very much personnel driven. DPW, as you can clearly see, is very much capital cost driven, and our personnel costs, and obviously this is on this year, which is extremely high capital. Normally our percentage of personnel costs is somewhere around 40 to 45%. This year it represents 29% of our overall budget request. Our operating costs, which is basically everything else in the operating budget, non-personnel related, is only 22%, and then 49% of our request is capital outlay. I did the same 5-year comparison of that breakout of our costs, so it's the same numbers, just presented in a slightly different way. And again, you see our operating costs, personnel costs are relatively flat, and it's really a capital problem. The next graph I've provided you, and I have historically provided this every year at budget time, but this year it's very, very significant, and I regret the fact that my red line printed pink because one of my ink cartridges is low. But our road plan, let me explain this. What I'm presenting to you is the overall network average PCI, which is pavement condition index. Ever since we started using micropaver in 2000, we have gone out and measured annually the condition of our pavement network. The work is done, we use a program that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers. It is very objective, it's very statistically correct. The data is gathered in such a fashion that you're not out there just picking the worst pieces of pavement or the worst sections, but there's a mathematical calculation of where the samples are taken on every road. We utilize a couple of engineering interns every summer to go out and do the measurements, and they're actually measuring the extent of the cracks that are in the pavement, the types of cracks, the severity of those cracks. And all of that information gets input into our program. We also put in there the work that we complete. So every year we update all of the roads that have been redone, the roads that have been repaved, all our general maintenance. And the program then crunches that all together.
How many miles of paved road?
Well, we maintain a little over 130 centerline miles of pavement.
Thank you.
Which equates to something like 49 million square feet, because we don't actually think in terms of miles, because roads are different widths. What we deal with is square feet of pavement, and there is a great large amount of it, is what it breaks down to. But the significance of this graph, and what is startling to me, is when you go back to that capital graph that I showed you earlier, the shrinking capital, obviously we're in a recession. The main bulk of our capital budget cuts were road plan related. I expected to see a flattening of this curve. I did not expect to see such a radical drop in PCI. We've had 2 years of very underfunded road plan, and you can clearly see the impact that it's already having. The reason I think this is very significant is, as a community, over the last 10 years, you know, we've allocated well over $25 million towards fixing up our road network. In 2 years of balancing budgets on the back of the road plan, we are quickly unraveling the progress that we made with that sizable investment in capital. So obviously, as Selectman Pierce mentioned earlier, it's my job to come in here and blow the whistle and ring the bell very loudly that I just don't think we can continue what we're doing without having a very adverse impact on the progress that we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to make. If you look at that graph historically, the only other dip or serious dip in there was after our floods. In 2005, we experienced a very dramatic increase in our construction costs, and then followed by an October storm event. And in spring of '06 and spring of '07, we had large storm events that did a lot of damage to our road network, and we weren't able to keep up with the work because we were too busy fixing all the critical damage.
Reconstruction and overlays slipped in those 2 years, and emphasis was on rebuilding of damaged
Exactly.
roads, flood damage.
So, you know, we'll see how this translates into dollars later on, but I think it's a very significant graph that that everybody needs to be aware of. So if there's no questions on any of that kind of background data, I'm prepared to kind of jump into the details. I focused the presentation on things where changes have occurred. I'm not proposing to go line by line through the budget, although if you really want to, we can, but focus primarily on areas of
That's
change.
what the other departments have been doing.
Okay. The cemetery budget, very few changes this year. As you remember, last year, we increased 2 of our seasonal, we have 3 seasonal folk in the cemetery, and we increased 2 of them from 14 weeks to 22 weeks. We're in the midst of that now. They're still with us at this point in the year. It seems to be helping out, so we are proposing to keep that the same. The only change in the personnel area was, I think it was probably our audit recommended shifting one amount of money over benefits over to operations, which we did. There were also a couple other general shifts. Telecommunications, I think, all shifted to admin, and you know, so you guys are probably aware of that if Sue already made her presentation. But and then the cemetery budget actually looks great because last year we had to replace a $7,000 lawnmower, which didn't repeat itself this year, so you actually see a decrease in the cemetery budget. I'll take credit for good management, but it really was because we didn't have to buy another lawnmower. So if there's no other questions on the cemetery operations, we'll move down to Public Works.
We'll let that one rest in peace.
Public Works operations, again, no changes whatsoever in staff, other than the one adjustment from cemetery. However, you see, if you look line by line, pretty substantial increases in the retirement lines and the workers' comp lines. I don't know if Sue has talked to the board yet about that, but that's more of it's beyond our control. It's something that I think she needs to work with, or you folks with LGC. This year, we implemented a new program to help us get caught up, and that was we contracted out roadside mowing. We used to have a contracted roadside mowing years and years ago. We had bought a piece of equipment with a roadside mowing attachment, which we used for many years. However, that was an old sidewalk tractor that had seen better days. We ended up replacing that a couple of years ago. So we put contracted roadside mowing back in 2012. The prices we got for that were higher than what we anticipated. So we did have to increase that line to incorporate that. The line striping, this has been an ongoing, which I know you folks are aware of and we're aware of, we have not been very satisfied at all with the results of our annual road striping. So this year, we really tightened our spec, particularly in the area of how we were going to inspect that work and enforce that this spec be met. That is very contrary to the normal practice when painting vendors go into a town situation, which is why there's been a delay getting striping done this year, because we've been arguing about it all summer. It is being done now. This week they're in, getting it done. And they did agree to do it for the bid price. However, we know that next year the bid price will be significantly higher, because even though we had a spec that was always out there, nobody ever anticipated having to actually meet the spec. When we force them to meet the spec, it really affects how much it costs them to come out and do the work. So next year I do anticipate a pretty sizable increase when we go out to bid, because now they're very aware that we're gonna be out there actually enforcing the specification.
What were the deficiencies you were seeing, Carl?
Well, when the DOT goes out, and the comment I always got was, how come, the local roads, 3 months, into fall, our lines are starting to fade, but 114 where DOT paints it is nice, because we always quoted state spec. That's what we want, one state spec. DOT puts down 20 mils of pavement. What we were getting was somewhere on the order of more like 7 mils. And that's typically what they did in towns. And I guess in the vendor's defense, the advantage to the lighter paint is, the rationale is less traffic, so you don't need 20 mils, and drying time. It dries a lot faster, so they don't get as many paint on car complaints, and it doesn't create as many problems. However, we in turn get the criticism of how come our lines don't hold up. So this year we're going to enforce it. They're going to put down the 20 mils. They keep telling us we're not going to like it, but they're going to put it down for us. I think we're going to like it just fine. So
Much of that's done at nighttime?
Yes. Yeah, they do it at night.
A couple more questions on this page.
Scott was first.
Oh, you let me jump on this word? Does it really matter if they're a little bit faded, if it's $10,000 or $12,000 less expensive?
Well, that's certainly a decision you folks could make.
I'm just saying, I mean, if we're talking about huge increases, that might be one where you're willing to make a compromise and say, you know what? We'll have some lines that are maybe a little faded than the state line, but it might be worth the price, so.
Well, in this case, that particular budget line's going from on the order of 12,000 to 17,000.
Right.
Yeah, and in some roads, that might not be an issue. In some roads, it might be a big issue.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm all about, you folks, but eyes wide open, that's the impact. That's why those lines didn't last. And if we want to continue, I'll lower the spec. I just don't like the idea of we, put out a spec and then we're not meeting it.
Well, I think what Carl is addressing is, I mean, for years I've been bringing up the fact that in the springtime, after we put down our sand and salt and everything, we get specific intersections that there's no more lines, especially if you go down Daniel Plummer Road and you get to Mast Road, you don't even know that there's 3 lanes there. You don't know you have a left turn lane and a right turn lane because they're gone.
Right now, there's no lanes.
Well,
In another few weeks, there will be,
Black
right?
paint,
Oh, another
Yeah.
few days, I hope.
well,
days.
it's when you're going down Daniel Plummer and you get to the light onto Mast Road is where you have that issue. And, we've been discussing that for years, and I guess the thing to see is, after this paint is put down correctly, if in the spring that goes away. Because it's not only there, it was also all through the Bernardville corridor with the center lane starting to disappear. That is a major issue, especially with the center lane. So I think it behooves us to see how this works and take it from there, because we had talked about, and we discussed this in the past, Carl said that the way that we were gonna have to deal with that is by painting twice a year. Now, twice a year versus putting the right amount of paint down for a little bit more is a lot
This
more
is
cost-effective.
gonna be turned into a good test of, Pinardville 114 definitely gets a lot more traffic than some
Right.
of our rural roads, which are headline,
That's
is-
correct.
is more apt of, the travelers are more apt to be crossing those lines than on a rural road.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but.
Yeah, no, going, all the businesses that they're turning into. Any further questions from the board on public works well, you're not done with operations yet.
No, the last item on this first slide is traffic light repair. And as you can see, there's a pretty sizable increase in that line. You know, we maintain 5 in controlled intersections down in Mass Road. We've upgraded, everything has been upgraded with the exception of the Hannaford controller, which is the town's to maintain. Hannaford put it in when they built Hannaford's, but it's the town's to maintain. It is very outdated, and it is no longer in sync with our new controllers. So I have a quote from our traffic light vendor. That's what I've budgeted for. We can get that last controller upgraded, and then the whole corridor should be in pretty good shape from a traffic management perspective, I hope.
The critical one you did, was it this year? Was the Pinardville?
We did the Kelly Street and Mast Road, or Pinard Street and Mast Road intersection we did this year, yeah, earlier this year. Or maybe it was last year, actually.
I think it was last
It was last year, because this year we just repaired all the loops and,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, questions on public works operations? Anyone from the budget committee reps here? Public works operations.
It's just a little question. I assume on this line striping thing, I mean, we can tailor our spec any way we want, right?
Yes.
So we could say, we want these roads to have the 20 and other roads to have the 7,
Yes, we could do that,
which would maybe target the problem a little bit.
yeah. Yep.
Well, you said the state spec called for 20.
Yes, the state
So
does
you
20.
would actually, rather than, in the past, you may have specified state specifications.
Right.
But now it's a matter of enforcing that to occur.
Right, and it's actually not as easy to enforce as one might think. I actually used some contacts up at DOT to help me figure out how to enforce this, and my original sense is, oh, that's easy, I'm just gonna go out and I'm gonna dip a micrometer in the paint and see what it measures, but that's not a very accurate, you can't do it that way, and if you try to do it that way, there is a test method to do it with plates, that you put metal plates down in front of the machine, but the vendors know how to beat that system, so it's not an accurate way to do it, so, you know, it was quite involved, but we're there, we're doing it. As far as, you know, we actually continue in public works operations. Street sweeping, guardrail repair, what you see there are decreases based on our usage of those lines. We did increase electricity on the crystal ball, that there's gonna be a rate increase for PSNH of 5%. Our propane, we have kind of migrated over. The folks in finance and admin have been tracking everybody's usage for the last several years, and we've gone to that average consumption model times the new bid price, which resulted in our line coming down a little bit. The traffic light repair, I think that's a typo, we already talked about that. Diesel and vehicle fuel, both of those, we do the same thing. It's the average consumption times the latest bid price. Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about this, and at the end of the day, average consumption times the bid price is what it is. Our tire line, we've increased, just based on what Mark anticipates, and I'm assuming, I think he's seeing some price increases, which doesn't surprise me.
And Mark is?
The mechanic fleet supervisor.
Yes, thank
Lubricants, same thing, slight increase there in cutting edges, but the rest of the maintenance lines kind of holding static. Painting and reconditioning, there's a decrease. We list here for you what it is that we're budgeting to deal with next year. We have our newer loader, which is not real new, but a reconditioning of that to try to keep that in good shape. Two 2006 dump trucks that we want to paint the frame on those. They have stainless steel bodies, which are fine, but we want to get the frame before they get too bad. And then the body and frame on an 07 dump truck. Miscellaneous tools, again, this is a shop, mostly a shop expense. A new shop compressor. I'm not sure why tires are listed here, but as I remember it, these are grader tires, and we have in CIP a grader rehab as well. Those tires are obviously very, very expensive, so I think that's why Mark had put it into this line. And a third truck lift for one of the bays, and then we always have a small budget just for miscellaneous tools that get damaged, broken, whatever. As far as maintenance charges for the buildings, this year we redid the flooring in the admin building. If you haven't been down there, it came out fabulous. It looks great. And next year, however, the roof is in desperate need of some attention. So we've added some money for replacing the roof on the admin building. Our salt line, there was a slight increase there, but again, we keep a running average of the tons of salt we used times the bid price. We've been fortunate enough to be able to go along with the New Hampshire DOT bid for salt.
I'd like to emphasize at that point, the operations you do to control the salt dispersal on roads. The trucks are measured going out, their weight, they're weighed coming back in, they know how many miles they've traveled, so you have pounds per mile, and there's a standard that you expect of your operators.
Oh, absolutely. It's very, it's actually very scientific, based on the weather conditions and the anticipated storm. They apply different rates of salt for different storms at different times.
I just want to
It's all
emphasize that it's a
very well tracked.
to me, it's a well-managed and thought-out process.
Just also, I think it's important to note that we aren't using the re-mounted salt spreaders. We're using a different type of salt spreader that's under the body.
Right.
So that makes the big difference.
That and the other, I think the other big, big difference now at this point in our fleet, I think we only have one truck left. All of the vast majority of trucks have computer automated spreader control, which allows us to dial in exactly how many pounds per lane mile we should be putting out. And again, it goes back to that recommended based on weather conditions and anticipated storm. So it certainly helps us control what we put out. And if you look back historically, the last few years we've been doing this, so you don't see the big decrease. But when we got to the point where most of it was salt control, when we started using the scale house, we really did have a pretty substantial reduction. In the bridge line, you see a pretty hefty increase. There is, in an out year of CIP, this project is out there. However, we don't really feel comfortable that we want to wait a few more years. There is, I think it's called Mystic Brook, that crosses
Yep.
by the old ice house
Between
near
the
Pizza Hut.
building that's, has Remax written on it,
Right.
going towards the Pizza Hut building.
We got a call last year from the New Hampshire DOT bridge people who were down there inspecting bridges, and they were there inspecting that. I think they got a little lost and thought that was one of their deals to look at. But they called us and said, hey, you might want to come look at this. And it's an old metal arch bridge. The bottom is rotted right out of it. It's similar to, we had the same thing on Mountain Road. We had 3 bridges we did on Mountain Road.
Yep.
The top one was a metal arch, and we were able to get in there and put a concrete trough in the bottom rather than replacing the whole thing. So that's what we're going to propose to do here as well. The rest of the structure is fine, it's just, you know, the metal rotted on the bottom. So we did put the money in bridge repairs here. If it gets cut, it is a few years out in CIP, and we'll just keep hoping it stays together.
Is there a connection here, Kyle, on why the bodies of water impounded going towards that culvert have been lowered?
No, would you like me to address that?
No. Go on.
That has nothing to do with the town.
Okay.
The resurfacing, crack sealing, sidewalk lines show an increase. Those are, as I mentioned earlier, I merely plugged in what we all agreed 2 years ago. This is our capital plan. Plugged it back in, so you see an increase shown there, and when we get to capital, you'll see a giant increase, but I just went back to, this is the plan, this is what the expense is supposed to be, so that's what you're seeing there. And that concludes Public Works operations.
Okay, let's, any comments now on the, I spoke to it quickly before, Public Works operations budget lines.
You mean solid waste? That's
No,
next.
no, the
Oh,
next,
okay.
but
I'm
any,
sorry.
any concluding comments on
Okay,
operations costs?
Question
Yeah.
from a budget committee member.
Yes, sir.
Well, just a quick clarification, Carl, the new traffic light in front of the canopies, that will speed up traffic by being synchronized with the other lights, is that the main advantage?
I wish I could tell you it would speed up traffic. I don't expect it'll speed up traffic. The situation we have with that signal, it's the same situation we had with the other signals. When something goes awry in it, it's very difficult to get parts because it's so old, and it doesn't match our other controllers, so we can't pull parts out of one to get the other one functioning. So that's the main issue. The main issue is simply that it's old, it's hard to get parts for, it's prone to failure because just all the connections are old. So when we replace it, it'll be like all the other ones along the corridor.
Another
So
question.
when you said in sync with the other lights, you meant in terms of its parts and.
Yeah,
not
from a maintenance perspective.
operation.
Yes. Elizabeth?
So, given the light winter we had last year, I assume we realized a fair amount of savings in snow removal and salt and all those other things. Are those all going to be reflected in the current budget, or were there things that we had bought in anticipation of a bad winter that could offset this budget we're talking about now?
There was nothing that we bought. Our salt shed's only so big, so I would love to be able to load it up, but it's already loaded. It's always loaded this time of year. So there's really nothing we can do proactively with that. I'm very hesitant to reduce it based on last year's experience, because we're all from New England, and we know how often last winter repeats itself, like never. I think it's the first time in my life. So I didn't kind of say, oh, this is the new trend, global warming, because I'm a little more of a realist, and I don't want to take that kind of chance. So yes, we did have savings, thank goodness. It kind of saved us in a couple of other areas with unanticipated expenses, but it's not really reflected here.
Okay.
Thank you for go into solid waste now.
Solid waste, you see, is very short. It's almost as short as cemetery. There are no changes at all in the staff areas there, other than the same spike in retirement and workers' comp. One increase that you do see in here is right now, we've gone over the last 4 months from receiving $15 a ton for our recyclables to now we're paying, I think currently it's $15 or $20 a ton that we're paying. So I did add some money to our recycling. Recycling is a traded commodity, so it's cyclical. It goes up and down. It's very dependent on foreign markets. Who knows what it'll do? It could rebound. We could be back to a profit-making thing next year, but conventional wisdom right now tells me that we're going to be paying for a while. Electricity, again, that 5% increase. Diesel fuel, it's the same average consumption times our new rate. And the only other blip you see in the solid waste budget is our maintenance supplies. Well, you should see an increase in tipping. We have a contract, long-term contract. I'll give the board a heads up. The Solid Waste Commission will hear this tomorrow or Thursday night, but the Merck up in Biddeford, where we have gone for years and years and years with our solid waste, has been sold. And we're not sure what that means to us yet, but we suspect it means that before the end of our contract term, that facility is going to close. So we're kind of working with the owners of the old owners of that facility, who we have a contract with, to see what that all means to us. We don't have a definitive answer, but it's something's going to change in the near future. On the same token,
That's a concern, not only for our town, but many other
lot of
communities
towns,
in
yes.
the region.
yes, it is.
Owing their solid waste going to a facility in Maine.
Yeah, and, you know, as the board is aware, the deal that we had all struck with the Concord Co-op has fallen apart. That's not gonna happen. I am working with some other towns that were involved in that project, as well as the folks that are still in the co-op and the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. We're all kind of putting our heads together to see if there's something we can do next, you know, if there's another way out. The Merck closing might put our solid waste into play in that equation. So there's a lot of balls in the air right now, solid waste speaking, and you know, I'm just trying to kind of involve a lot of people in it, and hopefully some good will come of it. But I don't have anything definitive to tell you about right now.
Selectman Devansk?
With that possibility about Biddeford, do we still have a possibility with the facility, the landfill up north, and the Rochester facility?
Well, Rochester's a different company. The facility
That's
up
waste
in,
management, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
The Bethlehem is where the vendor wants us to go.
Which vendor?
The one we're in, the same folks that own the Merck own the landfill in Bethlehem.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, I think, is their proposed solution. For us, a haul to Bethlehem is a totally different situation for us. It's all uphill.
Right.
It's further. You're going into a landfill instead of, you know, a concrete tipping floor. So equipment maintenance, you know, the longevity of our equipment are all affected by it. So we're resisting that without, I mean, there's got to be some adjustments to price
Right.
for us to even talk seriously about that. So, again, it's kind of all up in the air right now, and you'll be the first ones to hear when it all lands. The only other thing I didn't mention, and I want to mention it because this is another area where our in-house folks are in a position to save us a lot of money. Our compactor down there, and when I say compactor, I'm talking about the big one, the trash hopper, where everybody throws stuff. That now is almost 20 years old. For a few years, we've had some problems. We've had to go in there and try to maintain it. The equipment is aging. However, Mark and Zeb and Cass, the guys in the garage, have gone in there and worked with a vendor. And we have budgeted for materials, but the plan is that those guys will do the work. And that hopper basically needs to be relined. So it involves welding. A few years ago, through the budget process, we were able to get a portable welder that we can get in there and do that with. And we'll take the facility down like right after we close on a Saturday. The guys will jump in there and hopefully get it done before we have to open again on Tuesday. So just to give you, let you know, the guys are already kind of working through that plan, how that would work, minimizing the inconvenience on the community and doing it with our in-house talent to save a considerable amount of money.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or our budget representatives on solid waste?
And now, the big one.
Capital improvements.
As mentioned, we have a lot of projects in the capital improvements. The first one that if you go down the capital matrix or the capital tabs in the CIP tab, the first DPW project you're gonna come to is the West Lawn Cemetery expansion. What I had submitted back when we did CIP last summer was, last year we had to cut a pretty good chunk out of the budget. So I looked at it and said, let's get that back and finish phase 2. However, the cemetery trustees in the last month or two are wrestling with, in this phase 2, we were supposed to be doing the gate, we were supposed to be laying out a bunch of plots and the fencing along the front. There's been changes in the law. They're looking at the options for fencing, and they're struggling with how to really get what they want with the budget that we currently have available. They've been hoping that they can tap into some of their Cypre money that they have in their own trust funds. However, that's taking them longer to figure out than they thought, and I don't believe they have enough in their Cypre to do what they want to do anyway. So they may decide, and they haven't yet, but they may decide that they want to come back to you folks and the budget committee to adjust this number to get done what they need to get done. So that, I just want to give you the heads up. They haven't come to me yet, but I'm just aware that they're kind of talking about that as one of the options. The next one, which I unfortunately skipped over originally, but the rail trail culvert and slope repair. This is the slope that failed last year behind the county complex. And there's a granite box culvert down there where a couple of streams come together. There's $120,000 to get in there and fix those two areas. That budget number anticipates we're gonna do it with contracted, it'll be a contracted project.
Selectman Devanza?
Yeah, more of a comment on this. Also, when this was, CIP was discussed at the planning board, one of the things was, just the way that this is listed as, or thought about as rail trail, this is not really something for the rail trail. It just so happens that the rail trail is on top of the railroad bed. Regardless of whether that's there or not, this is something that we have to address because as the town, we're responsible for the water getting from the one side to the other side, and this is the culvert that goes under the old railroad bed. That's there. And that's the issue. It was just something that was pointed out at the planning board when CIP was discussed, and I just wanted to follow through with that because people that listen to this may think that this is $120,000 going to a rail trail.
Right.
And it's got nothing to do with the rail
The
trail.
granite culvert Carl speaks of is about 70 feet below the surface of the rail bed, the former rail bed. If that culvert were to fail, and it is very close to doing that,
That would be an oh my gosh situation.
you would have a significant dam of water or impounded water, and the embankment, which is 70 feet high, is not designed to be a dam. It's just pure sand, and it would blow away.
It would. And, you know, the other thing, and the reason that we're kind of trying to push it along is that granite, that culvert that crosses under the old rail bed is a granite structure, and it's clearly going to be a historic issue. It's going to need to be restored, and the longer we put off that restoration, the harder and more expensive it will get. So it's one of those things I kind of want to get it before it gets any worse.
These are chunks of granite that are 2 feet by 2 feet by 8 feet long, and that's how the culvert was, bricks of that size stacked up for a drainage culvert.
And now they're just kind of hanging there precariously.
Carl, are there any costs associated with the DHR issue? as far as archaeological studies or anything that's included
Yeah.
in here?
Yeah,
It's included in?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, what we anticipate to be a reasonable cost is incorporated in here, so it remains to be seen what
Right.
might get thrown at us. But,
Yeah, being familiar with that
yeah,
group, I know how it can be here to here.
yes.
Exactly.
Any other questions on that? Well, the next is obviously the big one. I shared with you the graph, the road plan. That is the biggest single increase in here. And, you know, what I'm proposing is, let's go back to the level that the road plan had anticipated. I would welcome more to try to catch up what we've lost, but being realistic, I always ask for what the agreed plan was. That's what I always plug in. A little tiny piece of that does go to the South Mass drainage thing to pay off the ARA note on that, which is the next line. Worthley Hill Road Drainage Project, again, I think this is worthy of some explanation. This involves a lot of pieces, but we have a condition all the way up Worthley Hill Road where our old infrastructure, when it was put in, I would surmise to say the day it was put in, which was probably like in the, who knows when, it's old metal pipe, it was not sized properly then, you know, and it never has been, because it's only a 12-inch pipe going up that massive hill. In the Mother's Day floods and several heavy rain events we've had since, it's become very clear to us that that old undersized metal pipe has literally exploded under the pressure. And so A, the pipe is too small, B, the pipe is old and rotted, and there's just a tremendous amount of water. There is a development that has been approved for up the hill. The part of the conditions of the planning board's approval was twofold that relate to this. One, the developer that develops that is responsible for, from Tyler Drive up, they're gonna totally rebuild Worthley Hill Road. So the upper end of Worthley is gonna be done by a private entity. They also were required to incorporate some of the drainage and try to help us reduce the amount of water flowing down that hill with their on-site drainage design. So there's some new detention ponds that'll be built that should relieve some of the pressure. However, the hill from Tyler down to Lamson Ave is still just woefully undersized. At the bottom of the hill, we have the work we did for the South Mass Drainage Project. We put in a detention pond, we put in a brand-new pipe down Lamson Ave that is sized. Yes, it is sized to handle the flow coming down the hill. However, we need to connect the two dots. The bottom of the hill's fine, above Tyler is fine, it's the piece in the middle is what this project is.
Can I just ask?
You got a comment? Yes.
Yeah, something, and on this, because this is a discussion, or not that this is a discussion, this is a capital improvement project discussion. But Carl talking about one of these that includes off-site improvement fees from a project that's being proposed and has approvals from the planning board. And I just thought that if we could take a moment to kind of expand and explain this a little bit, because some of this, I have a concern that there are not many people fully understand what off-site improvement fees are and impact fees are, and why they're there. They're not just something to add the cost to a developer as a tax, to say, but that project or a specific project adds to water flow, adds to traffic. As you mentioned, Hannaford, when they first went in, they paid for that controller, they paid for that light that was out there. That's an off-site improvement fee. One of the reasons for that is because that project there brings traffic. And when you bring that traffic, you need that light. So the concept is that the developer pays for that light because they are bringing up, they are increasing the traffic. If the developer didn't do it, then the taxpayers in Goffstown would have to pay for that. The project that you're talking about above affects a lot of water that runoff on that particular project, the slopes that are up in that apple orchard, that comes down Worthley Hill Road with the pipe that you're talking about. And those are all the traffic, and because of that development, it's creating that. And all they're really doing is addressing issues that are being brought about because of their development. If they weren't paying for that, then the taxpayers, that cost would have to be in these budgets that we're looking at for taxpayers to be paying for. And that's the purpose of off-site improvement fees and the development. I just wanted to take a minute and just expand on that a little bit, and appreciate the time that we're able to do that so people can get a better handle on what they are. And they're not just an arbitrary tax placed upon a developer as a tax.
As a matter of fact, the next project is another great example of that, because we have a couple of failed intersections in town, the Pleasant Street and Mass Road intersection, as well as Elm Street, High Street, and Main Street. These were proposed last year. We got a grant from the state, well, from the federal government, managed by the state, to repair these intersections. We have off-site improvement money from a very large development that, through the traffic studies, there was a substantial impact on an already failed intersection. So there's $150,000 from that developer going to go towards this project. And it was all part of the planning board's approval to get this done. So this project was approved last year. It ended up being cut because of the default budget, but it's to redo those two intersections on Mass Road, $761,000. The town share is I think it's a 55-45 match, but of the town share, 150 of it is coming from that private development.
Before I move on to Richard, I think the important point here on these two intersections you're discussing now is that, yes, 45-55 split, but does that federal money disappear if we don't enter into a contract next year?
Yeah, we had, that was part of our consideration last year when we cut it. You have 2 years to.
So we've invested a lot of time and effort to convince the state, who manages the federal money, that this is a worthwhile project. If we were to pull the plug and back out, and then we were to come forward in 3 years and say we want to do it again, we're apt to not get as many points when they rank all the projects.
We definitely wouldn't get as many points.
And there's a possibility that we may be charged engineering fees, depending on where they are with the project.
Yeah.
The other thing, though,
We've already incurred some expenses.
yeah, and, you know,
No, we may get a bill from the state
Right.
for engineering fees because we did
If
that.
the full project doesn't go forward, the charges we've already entered into might become ours.
Right, and we had that scenario when we had looked at the library intersection years ago. The state did 3 sets of plans, and the Board of Selectmen decided not to go forward because of the people that were at the public hearing, and we got a bill for $30,000 from the state for engineering fees.
Okay, Richard, did you have a comment on Worthley Hill Road?
Yeah.
Please.
Just enlighten me about that project. I guess it's my understanding that that project is really not going through anymore.
Yeah, it is.
And if that's the case, all that upper part of the project, I mean, what's the water gonna do?
Let Selectman Adams address that.
Yeah, they've requested time extensions from the planning board, and the planning board has granted those time extensions. So the project's still alive, even though there's nothing really going on in the ground.
You know, I know the water that they wanted and requested to be put in there from the water service that's in,
Tyler Drive,
Tyler Drive.
yes.
The people in Tyler Drive, I'm not gonna let that happen now.
Yeah.
So
So does that
you know
change
of,
the project?
you know of issues because of your role on the the village precinct,
Right.
yes, impacting the overall scope of
You know,
all
that
the
hasn't
projects.
come back to the planning board at this point since the last time. When you were on it, we had the time extension.
And that has happened since that time extension you gave. There's been some other problems that came up there, and there was a three-party agreement,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and one of the parties, I understand, is out of it now.
So,
Does that have to be resolved?
all of that is gonna be resolved in some fashion, dealing with the upper third of Worthley Hill. You're addressing the middle third.
Well, and it
But
doesn't,
how does that affect the lower end,
Yeah.
if all that gravel and all that junk up above, where they cleared all the land, is creating a lot of problems now? I mean, you stop the pipe somewhere, because they're gonna plug it up.
well,
I don't wanna work what the solutions are from an engineering standpoint.
well,
This-
but just suffice it to say that this still needs to be done. Whether that project goes or doesn't go, we still have failed
That's
pipes.
the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
The next project is one that we came forward with last year. We didn't get it funded last year. It's going to be an ongoing need. We finally got around, our engineering folks got around to inventorying, you know, I just mentioned it a few minutes ago that this development that we're talking about up there has a couple of detention ponds. The planning board's been requiring drainage infrastructure and detention ponds as long as there's been a planning board. Off-site flow of stormwater is always a concern. We have detention ponds all over town that have been just sadly neglected. You know, I can remember developments, matter of fact, one of them is, one of these detention ponds is Tyler Drive. And in my mind, Tyler Drive's still a new road. But Tyler Drive was built 16 years ago.
Right.
When we're allocating our maintenance resources, we just don't think of something like Tyler Drive because we're dealing with streets that haven't been touched since the 1960s and 70s. However, the problem is, when these developments were built and went in, all of that infrastructure was turned over to the town to maintain. We now have a database of 67 detention ponds and treatment swales that all need attention. Some of them have to be completely reconstructed because they've so filled in and overgrown over the years, they no longer exist. And that very concern that was addressed originally when the development was built is no longer being addressed. So we've just begun to get our hands around it. We were asking for the money to deal with 2 of these 67 things. We kind of prioritized based on the impacts we were seeing off-site and feel that these are the top 2 that we need to deal with. One of them is Tyler Drive's detention pond, and the other one is over by Maple Ave and Smith Road. You would never know it to drive by there and look, but there's actually supposed to be a detention pond there on the corner.
So at this rate, we're looking at 30 years?
Carl, do the requirements or specifications on a detention pond change or evolve over the last 20 years?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
in some
if you
cases.
do reconstruct, as you said, and clear out the growth that has taken place, are you working to the old standard of when it was put in, or are you constrained by some new standard?
Well, I would say that there's no one answer that's gonna suffice for that question. It's gonna be a case-by-case, site-by-site sort of analysis.
Are there permits involved?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I would think that there will be permits for all of this. And, you know, I wish I could give you a one answer fits all, but I don't think there is one. It'll be a case-by-case.
Thank you.
The detention pond crew we're gonna need. A truck, a trailer,
Um,
all the
The
equipment.
detention pond segment of the Public Works.
Yeah. The next project is the Uncanonic Dam study. You won't see that in your spreadsheet for having any dollars, but I will tell you, you folks awarded the contract recently to Du Bois and King.
Yep.
They are off beginning their breach analysis and the study of that dam and all the things that they needed to do. We are hoping that sometime in October, before you folks conclude your work, if there are deficiencies on that dam that need to be addressed quickly, they're gonna come to us. So I merely mention it now to give you the heads up that we may be back. Vehicle replacement, this is a giant snowball. If you look back last 2 years, with the exception of the one Packer that we bought this year, we have not replaced a vehicle at DPW. So the snowball has now gotten very large. I list out the vehicles here that were vetted through the CIP process. There were more that were requested, but these were the ones that CIP agreed to put forward. Our long-haul tractor, what we're actually replacing is what's currently the backup truck. I think it has 700 and something thousand miles on it, and we bought it used when we bought it. Our older loader, the older of our two loaders, replacement. The 99 10-wheeler, this is the vehicle that a few years ago we replaced the body, the dump body on the back. The truck itself, it needs to go, so the body can be transferred to whatever vehicle we buy, but the truck itself is at it. What we're proposing for a grader, we did have it in for a replacement, but what we're proposing is just a good rehab, the transmission, the blade, I don't know what it's called, but the thing that controls the whole blade, the table. And then an F-550, one of the F-550 dumps, and the pickup, the 2004 pickup. That pickup truck, you'll remember probably from last year, the sewer department bought it back in 2004, but the deal was the next time the town will buy it, and we'll kind of flip-flop back and forth because it's used by both. We have a grant application somewhere in the pipeline for a generator at the transfer station. This is one of the things that when we redid our hazardous mitigation plan several years ago, we identified everybody gets their fuel at the transfer station, public health, we need to be able to get the trash out of there in the event of an emergency. So sizing a generator that could at least keep that place minimally running. So we have applied for an emergency management grant. I'm not sure if we'll get it or not, but that's the premise by which this is in here. And then the last capital item that we have is we are hoping, if the road plan does pass, that we'll tackle Pleasant Street next year. There are 2 bridges on Pleasant Street that we need to deal with. The bridges themselves are fine. However, the bridges were built at one point in time. At a later point in time, the sidewalk was built on Pleasant Street, and those sidewalks are actually kind of frightening. Somebody just took railroad rails and kind of laid them from bank to bank and built a platform on them and hung a railing off it, and they're not holding up quite as well as the bridges themselves. So we need to do something a little safer and a little better with those sidewalks. So we're asking for another $80,000 to deal with the sidewalk crossings on the 2 bridges. That concludes the capital items.
Thank you, Carl. It's a full plate of public works infrastructure you're concerned with and responsible for.
If I could just make one more closing comment, and I know the board does this, but when you're really, before you dig into this year's capital stuff, take the time to really look at the 6-year matrix. I think Derek did a presentation on the CIP program the first night of budgets. You really need to understand how big the snowball is in the out years and what we're up against. When we did the Mass Road project, you folks are well aware, we did the sidewalk, that took a big chunk off a future year. We did the drainage down there, that took a big chunk off a future year. But there is still a lot in those future years that, as a town, we need to deal with. And I just can't say it loudly enough that you can't keep deferring because the projects don't do themselves. They don't get better on their own. We have to step up and deal with it.
Especially the third or fourth chart that you presented this evening on the pavement condition index, where that index has been increasing over the last few years, which is a healthy sign that the infrastructure is being brought up to better standards. And to have it go down in the last year is a trend we certainly don't want to encourage.
Scott has a question.
Any further questions, Scott?
It's not so much a question, I think it's more of a comment. I mean, I think Derek's graph, when we did the initial presentation a few weeks ago, tonight's charts, I think all demonstrate the fact of, deferred expenses, capital expenses is taking its toll. I'm going to go back to what we were told by our auditors a month and a half, 2 months ago, is that we have a tremendous capacity to bond, and I believe his quote was that we have one of the lowest debt ratios in the state. We also have a fairly healthy fund balance, which also there's a recommendation, and don't quote me, but I thought he said somewhere $600,000-700,000, if not up to $1 million, would be safe to spend on a one-time capital expenditure. So, I look at some of these items, and either they're ripe for both. They're ripe for bonding, and they're also appropriate for use of fund balance to try to get us to a point where I think we can make some headway. The one thing that I've experienced in my career here as a selectman, and even when I was in the school board, is that we cannot spend $5 million and put that on the warrant. And I think we all looked at that number and said, I would hope that we just said, no, we can't do that. But what we may be able to do is to try to use fund balance and or bond, because the rates are historically low, to try to then capture that high point in the CIP, to smooth it out over a period of 5 years while interest rates are relatively low, while we have a healthy fund balance, so that we can slowly and incrementally increase our allocations for those things. But I think it's safe to say we're not in an economic recovery which would lend itself to doing that, and the community will never support, $5 million in capital improvement. So, I think we may all see, I think we're all saying, yeah, we really need it, we really need it, we really need it, but I'm looking at it saying, if we ask for it all, we will get none of it. So I think we have to pick and choose which ones are the most mission critical.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Selectman Devaney.
just following up on that and expanding a little bit, one of the things that we have in front of us that we have to deal with right now is, Uncle Ben and QE3. We're going to be paying the piper for QE3, which is quantitative easing the third time, which is what's driving the stock market up and what's keeping the interest rates down right now, as what Ben Bernanke said. And it's going to come to a point where we're going to have inflation. Interest rates are going to go up and we're going to have inflation. It would behoove us if we could have a cooperative effort to try to do something with the fund balance that we have, to try to capitalize on that, to try to get a handle on some of these issues that we have now. Because I'll tell you right now, if we think that we have a big bump in there now, if we don't deal with it now, when it comes time to pay the piper and we have interest rates go up and we have inflation go up, we're never going to be able to get a handle on it, because we're going to have missed the boat. The train is gone at that point. I mean, it's something that we seriously need to look at, and I just hope everybody understands that. I mean, you look at the stock market, everybody thinks, oh, gee, the stock market's doing great. The only reason the stock market's doing great is because it's the price of cash
is being deflated. You can't keep
Thank
printing
you for
money.
all that global perspective. 'cause
No, but it
it's
affects
important,
us
you know, it's
individually,
important.
it
It's
affects us
important, Scott.
all.
Yeah, I mean, I know that this community has not supported, road bonds. But I'll tell you, if there's ever a time to think about a road bond, it's now, because we can't get to $2.5 million in road funding, Carl. I mean, we were at 1.5, then we lost $1 million, so because people didn't support it, and now we're at 500,000 in the default budget. But we can't, there's no way that we're gonna be able to go from 500,000 to 2.5 or 2.6. That, I don't see that happening. But I do think we have to take a look at, could we finance, a road bond at $5 million and try to, get 3 or 4, 3, years out of it and go that route. And I know Bedford has done it with there's been some successes and there's been some people who are critical of it. And I understand that, but that is, I think, the one thing that we strongly have to consider now. And then if we do decide to go that route, that will then free up some of our CIP money to try to do, a bridge, a slope failure. I mean, these are all important things, but when you total them all up, they add up to $1 million. So I think we really need to strongly think about that. And a road bond, if it will allow us to stretch out the road work over a couple of years, that we don't have to do it all in, 1 or 2 construction cycles, because that puts the fear of God into everybody, saying, oh, God forbid we'll have traffic, throughout town again. I don't want to deal with that, but other towns do it, and I think we have to think about it here.
Carl's presented the problems and the predicament we're facing as a board, and what it's gonna cost, and we've heard discussion of how to finance that, which is going to be our responsibility going into the future. And closing comments
Well,
on the
this
Public
this
Works?
diverges from DPW specifically, but we still need to get together with our counterparts from the school side. We've been trying to get together with
It's
them
gonna be next
because as a
Tuesday.
community, we need to talk about them in general, especially when an article hits the news that says they're gonna be giving $1 million back to the taxpayers. I mean, there's some conversations that need to be had to put it in proper perspective so that the taxpayer knows what they're up against from both sides, school side and the town side. And, I know we're getting there, but it needs to happen.
Yeah, next Tuesday, I think we're
Yeah.
slated for that, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Was it 6?
6.
Well,
Speaking,
just so the viewing public knows that,
Right,
again, we're
I think-
moving towards that.
that should be a segue to that, is I think we need to delineate
Budget committee.
a little agenda, so with
So it's a productive meeting,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, Elizabeth, please.
I actually have a question. I'm looking at the road plan line, and the year-to-date spending is only 182.
Elizabeth, are you in the capital?
I'm in the capital, the CIP budget, the reclamation line.
Bill hasn't come in yet.
The current budget has 500,000 adopted, and the year-to-date is 182.
Yeah, it'll be gone.
Okay.
One of the things, and you should all be aware of it, we've been on Mass Road so long that we're just now starting to spend the money, like on the other projects. We paved East Dunbarton Road last week. We're slated to pave Gorham Pond Road Wednesday. So some of the other big projects are gonna start hitting the books now. So it won't take us long to spend that $500,000.
Ivan's probably happy now.
What's your favorite road, Ivan? Go ahead, what's your question?
For the CIP committee, 6 or 8 people meet for 6 or 8 weeks, and the CIP book is twice as thick as the municipal budget book. A huge amount of effort goes into it, and I think we went through 6 iterations of a chart that shows all these CIP projects from all the department heads. So the department heads have sat and done the same thing to the 6 or 8 people who met for 6 or 8 weeks. The question is, does the Board of Selectmen take that graph and chart and factor it into your budget considerations, your budget deliberations?
Of course, that's my answer. That would be an insult to CIP if we didn't, but, and the department heads, but I would say though that, I mean, I treat it as I do like my own house. I kind of know what has to get done over from year to year to year, but then there's also what can I afford to do every year, and that's the balance. So I think we know, as Carl said, that we have deferred things, and now I think it goes back to what the chairman said, is that now we have to come up with a way of how we're going to finance it, because, or how we're going to prioritize it, because it's, you know, we know what we have, but what are the priorities? And as Selectman Adams said, we're not in a vacuum here. We got to work with the school district because they have the Bartlett and Maple Avenue Elementary School renovation / expansion, which, you know, it's a priority for them as well. We've talked about other projects, whether they be the ones that Carl mentioned or fire department stations, et cetera. And we have to actually, we're going to meet next week and we're going to start talking about, here are what the town's issues are. We're going to hear from the school what theirs are and kind of have a collective dialogue about that. But I think for us, I've been doing this long enough to know that there's really, the one way to get out of this mess is to bond some of this stuff. The stuff that is bondable. I mean, you don't bond, you know, financial software, you know, but roads you might want to bond, or big items you can bond. And the rates are low. This is the perfect time to do it, and we have the capacity to do it. But it takes a 60% vote to get it done. And that's where we need leadership from the selectmen, the school board, budget committee members, the influential folks to convince the voters that, yeah, the crap has hit the fan. We have to bond. We have to take out a loan to pay for this stuff, and we have such fantastic ability to borrow right now that it would be foolish not to. And that's where the leadership has to come out.
Thank you, Carl.
Very welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carl.
In wrapping up this evening, we're down to committee reports. Just excuse me for a moment. Elizabeth, if you could stay with us for 10 minutes, I have an item to discuss with you later. Hoping we'll conclude. Okay. Library. Could we slip into Parks and Rec while I find my library notes?
Yes, sir, we can. Parks and Recs met, had a rather lengthy meeting. The Roy Park pool, Barnard Park pool, scheduled for winterization. There was some work done on them as well in the closing to alleviate some problems for next year's startup. We should be all set. The fertilizing of the Surratt Complex, Barnard football fields are all set. Aeration's been done as well. On the parks, as far as the Barnard Park, the director had Vermont Tennis Surface Company come in and give quotes for painting of the outdoor basketball courts, tennis courts, and track. The last time they were resurfaced was in 1995. Tennis courts in Roy Park were done in 2000. The parks, the track at Barnard Park had Pike Industry come in. Pike Industry gave 3 quotes for 3 different thicknesses of asphalt to be laid down. With Carl, Carl has worked the deal out with Rick. I guess DPW is going to do the surface preparation work, whether we decide to put a 1-inch overlay. If it's a 1-inch overlay, it's $23,000 and some change. 2-inch overlay is $42,000 and some change. And to reclaim and do a fine grade is a grand total of $53,000. The DPW Rick is gonna meet with the DPW 917, which is taking place already. So there's works in going on with that. The, money for the, revolving fund usage account, they did spend significant amounts of money in that. The $25,000 was spent, or is going to be spent out of that to fix the cracks at the, track at the, park, so that the park will have a safe walking track for people to walk with in town. They spent $10,000, they're gonna spend $10,000 for the revolving fund to refurbish the Barnard basketball courts. That'll be painted, new lines, some new hoops and stuff like that. They also, will spend $11,000 out of the revolving fund to do some refurbishing of, Roy Park, the basketball court, new lines, new surface painting, and stuff like that. Most of this money, a lot of this money here was in CIP. If you total up the 25, the 10,000, 35,000, the 11,000, it's almost $50,000 is going to be taken out of CIP. So when CIP is worked on again, some of these projects were listed in CIP, they'll be now taken out of CIP because of the money that we spent on the revolving fund.
That'll certainly help.
Do you want to update on the 293 corridor as well?
Library trustees did meet September 19th. Summary of that activity, trustees authorized the director of the library to hire a new library assistant. They approved deaccessioning of some of their books, which would be then given to the Friends of the Public Library and included in a book sale that is scheduled for the Pumpkin Regatta weekend. And they are continuing an effort to redefine their library goals, and they have a committee working on that document. That's it from the library standpoint. Any further business? I have one, but the board member? Pumpkin Boat Captain. The Main Street program will allow this board to send a representative, and I would like to nominate the director of the Park and Rec Department to captain the boat allocated
And
to
I'm
the
unavailable,
selectmen.
sir, I'm out of town.
I know, I already have questioned potential boat captains here. So do I have a consensus that,
Yes.
that we would allow the Director of Public Works to captain our
Captain the
boat?
Board of Selectmen's vote?
It's
Yes.
Public Works you're doing, you're talking
No.
about?
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, I thought you said Public Works.
No.
So
Park and Rec.
You're looking, so it would be Rick?
Rick,
Yeah.
Rick.
right.
Okay.
You'd be perfect for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your support.
He's crazy enough to do it, then, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Next year's Derek.
Any further? Any further items that the board has to discuss this evening? If not, motion to
Second.
adjourn. Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Indicate.